Welcome to the Ocean Race Europe at the start of leg 2 from Cascais, Portugal to Alicante, Spain. Our 12 teams are gearing up for the starts and what will be a downwind blast for the next 10 hours to begin this 600 nautical mile race. I'm Noah Meinbest, and joining me is two-time ocean racer and Olympian Sally Barco. And Sally, we're going to see a little bit of everything on this leg, something to test every aspect of a team skill set.
That's right, Niall. What a turnaround from the first leg start, whole new conditions. And it's going to be pretty exciting to see who can punch out of the gate here in the lead.
Well, before we get into the final start countdown, let's take a look back at leg 1. Welcome to the inaugural ocean race, bringing together two high-point offshore classes, one course.
Starts coming up here, 18 minutes still go, first team, the team. Try to ramp up and give a course the event, swim learners can.
Gone birds now, as you can beautiful sailing, champagne sailing.
We rounded the waypoint ago, and we're heading back to Cascais now. It should be a very windy day, I think. So it's nice to be going fast, but definitely a different lifestyle. A bit of a drag race. Some of the boats did their kites, some of them mows. To be honest, the pressure's pretty up and down. So at the moment, anyone's game.
It's crazy, this super intense race. Did you see the finish? 4 votes in a row. And it came this close after 4 days in a wet and wild race. We're super happy.
Our great first leg for the Ocean Race Europe, but today is the start of leg 2 with split starts for the IMOCA 60s and the VO65s. The VO65s will head off first in a little over 10 minutes at 1300 local time, and then the IMOCA 60s after them at 1320. Now, after the 1,500 mile leg 1, the teams had another chance to enjoy close quarter racing, this time in the Bay of Cascais with the Murapuri Foundation Sailing Trophy. The VO65s all got off the line well, but Sailing Poland soon felt the heat and started to slip back behind the others. The IMOCA 60s were much more conservative when it became their turn to line up, but no holding back in speed once the gun fired. 11th Hour Racing and Corum with Lingtao all finding the chance to foil away. Away from the protection of the shore, the waves were waiting for the boats. A taste of what was to come for the next 4 hours as the boats pushed further into the rough conditions. The VO65s prepared for a downwind blast with spinnaker sails at the ready, no one backing off from maximising the power available. A tough bear away and quickly up to speed with AkzoNobel Ocean Racing overtaking Murapuri Foundation Racing Team. The Amoca 60s behind them were about to be in their downwind element. The 4 boats with foils wasted no time in finding their groove, but it wasn't easy to stay there. 11th hour racing burying their bow on the short waves as they kept pushing for the win. The last upwind leg saw Murpuri Foundation Racing Team retake the lead and controlled AkzoNobel Ocean Racing as the 2 teams trading tacks. The Portuguese team held AkzoNobel at bay and took the win in their home waters, and with it, the maximum of 3 bonus points. AkzoNobel finished in 2nd place with Sailing Poland in 3rd, each taking the rest of the bonus points available. In the Amocas, the foils having set the pace downwind, it was a more traditional setup of offshore Team Germany that shone through on the upwind leg. Robert Stanjek and his team overhauling 11th hour racing, pushing the Americans into 2nd, with Coram now in 3rd place. An upset in the running order for the Amocas and proof that anything is possible with a hard-working team. Well, these are the pictures at the moment, live from the start line. And we're going to have a little bit of a look at what the weather has got in store for the teams at this start. But before we do that, I mean, Murpuri Foundation Racing Team, they may have dominated the Murpuri Sailing Trophy in the VO65s, but they let leg 1 slip through their fingers in the final stages. And when we spoke to the teams ahead of today's racing, it was clear Johan Richomme wanted to set the record straight.
I think we showed some good pace, good organization on the first leg. It didn't pay off, so we are majorly pissed off, and we're very motivated to get some good results on the score sheet. The leg is going to be intense. It's a very long downwind all the way to Cape St. Vincent, and then a big transition before coming into some very strong winds at the Strait of Gibraltar, and maybe some tacking on the Moroccan coast, and then it's the Med. So wind is going to be a little bit on and off, and it's going to take us quite a bit of time, almost 4 days to get to Alicante.
It's going to be another nice start in the Atlantic, for sure, with some more sea state conditions, and then, probably tricky through the straits, which I've never done, so I'm excited to do that. And in the Med, it's going to be light and a long upwind, so yeah, maybe we get some chances there.
The first sort of 12, 14 hours, that'll be good fun, like running down the coast, like beautiful sailing, but you know you're heading into not the most fun conditions coming out of Gibraltar, but like to sail in and out of Gibraltar is a pretty special thing to do. It's just amazing. It's amazing, like wind tunnel, and sadly in this occasion the wind tunnel's operating against us. So yeah, it could be a little nasty for another 12 hours getting through the gap with, you've heard anything from 20 to 40 knots upwind. So it'll be in daylight hours, so that takes a little bit of the anxiety away, but it'll be full on.
I've gone through there a good dozen of times, and I've been unfortunate enough to mostly go there upwind. So it's no different this time, and from experience we can expect some really steep short waves. With this young crew, it's all set the expectations and making sure we set up the boat easy early. So forget a bit about the racing and just make sure that we get through there in one piece.
You kind of look at it and go, okay, the first half is fairly busy, and you kind of focus on getting through Gibraltar, and then you go, oh boy, the second half's going to be really busy.
This forecast is perfect for my boat and my team, and I hope we'll do better race, because we have done 2 legs at the 3rd place. Now it's the time for win, I think.
Yeah, of course we enjoyed the win, and we should. But we also tried to get the expectations down a little bit. Because it's not quite normal that a young team wins their very first race. So now we are ready for leg 2. We're going to enjoy it, push as hard as we can, and we just go in there open. The goal is to have fun. We have a couple of new guys in the crew, new under 30 sailors. I won't say we start all over, but yeah, we're going to have fun, learn a lot, and enjoy this race.
Well, first off will be the Imoca 60s, and yesterday's racing with the points awarded to the top 3 teams has put 11th Hour Racing in first, with offshore team Germany in second and leg 1 winner Corum in third. Linked Out sit in fourth, but sounding very confident of another strong performance on the water today, with Bureau Valley in fifth and yet to find their groove. Well, there we can see the fleet at the moment, and there is the current leader in the Imoca 60s. 11th Hour Racing, waiting to get themselves into the big breeze and away. Certainly the opening stage of this leg are really going to favour not just this team, but all of the Imoca 60s with their foils. So let's take a look at what the opening stages of this leg are going to be like. Well, we begin tucked up close to the shore. This is going to see a very light and fluky conditions, but from the start line, a reaching start out into the breeze and the waves as well. There's going to be one mark, most likely a bear away, possibly a jibe, but it looks like the stronger breeze is going to be offshore. So once the boat's straight set, they are then heading down south and off onto the 600 nautical mile course. Inside of 2 minutes to go, the first start being the Imoca 60s. And Sally, the first thing I think we have to mention here is the difference in conditions. We've been talking it up so much about how big and breezy this start is going to be, but in reality, the first few minutes actually is going to be pretty patchy.
It's going to be a nice solid breeze where they can start ripping downwind. So I think it's going to be about how they set up. You can see a lot of choices of sits in the air. They're going to need the right power on the reach to keep their nose clear, and then the bigger sail for the bear away.
And this big bear away is going to be very interesting to see how the Imoca 60s do it and exactly what course their weather routing is going to put them on. We're going to have 5 of the Imocas here, and just before we get into those final movements at the start, I think it's worth just mentioning the offshore team Germany, the boat that right now is on the line, having a little look at that final position. No foils, however, very good when we get onto VMG downwind.
That's right. I think what we're seeing is that actually the Team Germany has a very maneuverable Imoca 60 relative to the other boats. And, you know, we've seen that play out with the conditions of tacking upwind, jibing, and actually maybe even some sail peeling. But let's see how this plays out without having a foil, especially on the reach. I think it'll be an interesting speed dynamic between the fleet.
Well, we are showing 10 seconds to go for the start, but I'm not sure exactly whether our clock and the Imoca 60's approach at the moment is agreeing, because we've got offshore team Germany with 2 head sails furled up, Linked Out coming down towards the line with still with their sails filled, so we might actually be into a short delay. And Sally, this was being discussed earlier before we came on air. In fact, the breeze on the start line at the moment only arrived really around about 45 minutes ago. Bill O'Hara and Phil Lawrence and the race management team at one point were reporting only 5 knots of wind on the start. It's one of those things that you just have to kind of roll with it in our sport.
You do, and you know, there's no harm in delaying here, just a little bit, letting the pressure fill in, because it's it's going to be a more even start, a more fair reach across if the breeze fills in, rather relative to having no wind at the start, a big park up, and then just a slow slog out to the reach mark. So if they have delayed, it's probably just for a little bit of the breeze to fill in.
On board at the moment with 11th Hour Racing. Sally, interesting to see those kind of sailcloth bearings over a lot of the boats. There's so many interesting points to pick out here on the Imocas.
There sure is, and you know, a lot of this is just a water protection, so you're not basically collecting a ton of water. You see the big hatch, and when they start ripping downwind, you're going to realize why they have that huge covering. They're going so fast, the water is like more than a fire hose coming at you, and that just provides such great protection. And then, you know, across the back, as you saw, like making sure that, you know, generally sometimes making sure that just the lines and stuff don't fly out the back and cause more problems.
Well, that's a great shot from the heli at the moment. Just looking out, we are just moving around, but that's basically the view of the water that the boats are going to be sailing into. The race control boat just going out of view on the right, and it looks to be that's where the pin mark is at the other end of the line, that red buoy with the ribs clustered round. So the Imoca 60s now just moving around. We're waiting for confirmation as to the final few seconds. But certainly yesterday, even for the coastal race, and if we go all the way back to the start of leg 1, Sally, it's normal to see the Imoca 60s very conservative on the start line, not like the 65s who are fighting for those final seconds.
That's right. We know that the 60s are, it's all about, you know, a reaching speed game. It's not really about those 1 or 2 feet or seconds at the start line. It's about the long game for them. So it's, you know, it's not a big deal if they're a little bit off the pace at the line, but you can see them now. I think they're pushing a little harder than they were for the first start, knowing that the position's going to pay off on that first reach mark.
And if you had any doubt as to what the conditions were going to be, that shot just a moment ago on board Linked Out showed the stack about as aft as you can get it. That's all the way to the sails and gear and everything right at the back of the boat, because they know that they are about to go downwind with a lot of breeze behind them.
And the difference here on the Imoca 60, you see how little weather gear or foul weather gear they're having. Marie Brieux, like just having shorts and a t-shirt basically means as soon as the breeze comes on, she's going under the hatch and going to be sailing the boat from full protection. Be a very different sight on the Volvo 65s.
Well, we are inside of 2 minutes to go now for this delayed start. We have got Coram here just getting themselves ready for the boat. Interesting to see how wonderful those canopies are when you're going downwind, and just as you were saying, how protected you are in terms of gear, but how limited it means visibility-wise on the start line, having to get a crew member to stand up and actually looking round and trying to spot what's going on.
Yeah, a whole nother level of communication, but you know, I think the line is big enough that they can have enough space between the other boats here, as you see, between 11th Hour and Coram. They're not going to be pressuring each other. They're just looking for a nice acceleration off the line and get in their own groove and let these boats foil and start to fly.
1 minute to go for the start line, and we've been wondering what kind of approach we were going to see from the Imoca 60s, and like we said, it seems to be relatively conservative and fairly conventional. The boats are going to be heading off on starboard tack. We are seeing the jibs deployed at the moment. 11th Hour Racing lining up for what appears to be the leeward end of the line. We've got Coram a little bit more towards the middle. Offshore Team Germany probably have quite a bit more of maneuverability that they can put into the start right now. But the 60s are now going to be approaching the line. And here we go into the start. It is Linked Out coming down well. They've got a good bit of breeze underneath them. Bure Valley late to the line. Offshore Team Germany underneath Linked Out with a chance to luff. 11th Hour Racing now get their sails out. All of the Imoca 60s look like they're going to be a little bit shy on the gun, but that's where that conservative nature comes in. Linked Out slowing down for those final few seconds. 11th Hour Racing got their time on distance well. They're rolling straight over the top with Coram as well. So it's the Americans that get the best start in terms of speed. Linked Out at the leeward end, the end that they wanted, and they are now away as well. Linked Out, 11th Hour Racing and Coram all off the line and racing. Well, Sally, 11th Hour Racing right now. The big question, of course, is when we're going to start seeing those bows popping as the boat started to race, and we're seeing it right now. There's enough breeze that the Imocas are stretching their legs.
Yeah, you can see the bow just starting to float up, and you know that means the foils are just starting to engage. And I think that's quite an interesting view there with linked out more to leeward and basically having a hotter angle to this reach mark and maybe pressing forward a bit. I'm not sure it's going to matter so much about who actually gets to this mark first, but more about who actually has the overall speed on this next 12 to 14 hours.
Look at the breeze that is waiting for them as well from that helicopter shot. It's flat water, but the crests of the waves out past that last rounding mark are there. We are on board with linked out. This is the stack that we mentioned before. We know that it blocks our view slightly, but there is a very good reason as to why all those kilos are back there. And on this team, more than the others, a bit of wet weather gear as well.
Yeah, I think it gives you an idea how much cover there is or how much they're expecting to be outside the boat. They're probably just also ready for anything coming their way. I think it's quite important to know that, you know, whatever they're used to with this boat single-handed, as they have more crew, they really are trying to push it harder. So there's a little bit of unknown about how they're going to do that and when they're going to be backing off, but also what that means for, you know, the crew maneuverability on the boat.
Linked out, leading the fleet, leading the spectators as well, out towards that first turning mark. And the more boat lengths that they start to roll over, the more that the breeze seems to look better for them, the more that the boat just seems to take off. Behind them, offshore Team Germany with no foil to kick in. And it would have been very easy to look at the scorecard at the beginning of this event and think that offshore Team Germany weren't really going to focus, or weren't really going to feature, sorry, Sally. But, I mean, not just in the coastal race yesterday, but there have been moments, even on leg one, where this boat has proved very capable.
That's right. I think something that they have is in their maneuverability, and you heard them talk about they're holding on in the downwind legs. They're going to have to do the same thing here in the first part of this leg, is just push the boat as best to their ability, make some really smart decisions on the navigation and tactics, not sail any extra miles, and then they're really going to come to shine when they turn that corner down south in the Straits of Gibraltar and hopefully have a lot more upwind angle and maneuverability. And well, it's going to be interesting to see how much they're able to push on this downwind without the foils. If, you know, it's all about how many miles they don't lose, essentially.
Well, 5 people on board, and Sally, I noticed in the previous shot, one of them was actually wearing a harness. You see it quite often in the 65s, a climbing harness, even when you go up to the top of the rig. You don't see it very often in the Imoca 60s. And so not only is the boat a little bit different, but it is demanding different style of sailing and different skills. There is the weather that is waiting for them, and underneath offshore Team Germany it is Bureau Valley. And I think we can say at this point, Sally, that this boat, they haven't shown us yet their full capability.
They haven't. You know, it's a fairly new boat, and I think it's a huge point for this whole fleet is that there's actually so much to learn about how to sail these Imoca 60s with a crew. So there's a lot going on with, you know, we talk about the maneuverability, which winches you're using, which peeling and all of that, but also the modes. And here you see them just starting to light it up and finding the right angles relative to what the boat is designed for, I think is a huge point for this team. And I'm guessing we're just going to see them continue to learn, continue to get faster, and use this race as a real benchmark with how the boat's performing in different conditions and wave states. You see the boat kind of jumping around there. It's quite lively, but it's not driving forward through the, like, really stable and on the foils. And I wonder if that's, you know, something towards the design or just the wave state, how it's increasing as they get out to this turning mark.
And they're certainly putting on a nice display at the moment. I mean, you talk a little bit about stability and that smooth riding height. Each of the Imoca 60s obviously have their edge, but 11th Hour Racing, oh, and just in front of 11th Hour Racing, there was a boat on anchor, 11th Hour Racing, luffing up to go round the anchor line. They're still sailing with the boat that was on anchor now safely to leeward, but unfortunately, just getting out of view of 11th Hour Racing, and the boat comes pretty close to their line. Still moving at the moment, and I mean, Sally, we've seen this before. In fact, actually, on the finishing stages of leg one, we've seen with the Imoca 60s, it's not just in terms of keeping your eye on the bow and the beams. There's an awful lot sticking out the sides on this boat.
There sure is. It's a super wide platform with the foils, but also and then with the limited visibility. Not surprised. There's probably just a huge blind spot, like changing lanes in a car where you can't see over your shoulder exactly where they're actually, what's clear to leeward. You need to have big visual to make sure you're really clear on your view. And looks like they're maybe slowing up here to check what happened to that foil. Maybe they're hard to see what actually looked like on the base of that foil, but maybe there was a bit of some damage. So I imagine they just take a moment to really regroup and figure out if they have anything really serious going on.
I mean, I think I should point out to anybody at home that Sally's nose was pressed up right up to the screen there, as I'm sure you were at home watching this, trying to work out whether we could see anything on that left-hand foil. We are on board now with 11th Hour Racing, and there you can see on the left-hand side, I believe that's Simon Fisher, the navigator, just going forward to have a little bit of a look. It would be disastrous at this point in the race, this early on, if you get to a situation where structurally you've done a little bit of damage to the performance of your boat. And while we say that, look at this, head sails furling up, Sally. That is not a good omen.
Not a good sign. You can see, it's hard to see really, but there's a big black spot there on that leeward foil. Whether that's a crack in it from the impact or not, or yeah, I'm guessing that's what it is. And now that they furled up the sails, they need to have a really solid look at what's going on. So hopefully we get some info from the boat, and luckily everybody's okay, and things can be repaired as they go. But what a sore sight to see here just on this first little reach to the turning mark.
Well, an update from the fleet. It is Linked Out who are pushing pretty fast, and now the speeds come. Just look at the difference in the speeds. 11th Hour Racing, obviously, they've slowed up just to double check that everything on board their boat is okay, but it is nearly 20 knots for Linked Out heading towards that first mark. Bureau behind them at 16 knots, and then Coram 12 knots still yet to get into the best of that breeze. They are going to be turning to the left, and they are going to be going downwind. The position of Mark 1 not quite as accurate as it is on the water. Linked Out now, the track has taken themselves round that mark. The speed dips down, but now we could be expecting, Sally, that once we get onto that downwind course, not only are you going to be into the breeze, but also you're not limited by pointing for a specific point. You've got the ocean to choose.
That's right, and that's where these 60s are just gonna, shine. Really nice, strong wind, and they can choose their angles, which typically isn't a straight VMG downwind. They're going to be heated up a little bit, probably reaching 30-some knots. It looks like they're just setting up here and trying to get the boat at the right angle and starting to accelerate.
On board with Coram right now. This is the breeze, these are the conditions, this is the sailing that we have been waiting for. It is still shorts and t-shirt. Just going out of view to leeward of this boat was, I believe, offshore Team Germany. This angle, right now, this is when the foil really kicks in. We mentioned the foil so much. What we're talking about is the lift. This is something that allows the boat to resist the heeling force of the wind in the sails, keeps the boat more upright, allows it to push against the wind and really get itself mirroring. Bureau Valley now next to round. They're going to be rounding in third place, and this is a very good start. I know that the early stages of this legs don't mean too much. It's all about those weather transitions, but this is going to be feeling nice for Bureau Valley to straight away be feeling like they're in the fight. Linked Out now round the mark, and we are going downwind, and that's a big sail coming out to play.
That is coming out of the sock there. They use that, obviously. It's a big deal when you're shorthanding this boat, especially in the single-handed. That's how they deploy it. And yeah, look at the size of that, and they're going to start to heat it up now. Interesting how long it takes to get that sail out. Hopefully, I'm guessing on the 65s it's easier. You're going to see it deploy a lot sooner. But like we said, in these 60s, especially in this Linked Out, it's about the long game, and start to see them accelerate here and find their mode.
And so much of the systems on board these boats are still designed for solo sailing. This is a showcase of what you can do with the Imoca 60's multi-crewed. So seeing the speed in which you can get a big sail like that up possibly is because the system is designed for, one person.
100%, Niall. It's like going to be super hard to actually hoist. You're not going to have enough winches and pedestals basically to do it as fast as you would like. So it's a little bit of timing, but also just developing that. And I think every time they do it with more than, you know, 1 or 2 people on the boat, it's going to get faster and faster.
Linked out in the lead, Bure Valley behind them. We have then got Coram going underneath 11th Hour Racing, who's still sailing slow at the moment, yet sailing on the course. So if you're fans of 11th Hour Racing, it looks like the Americans are still continuing on their way. Offshore Team Germany, as you would predict after that close reach in breeze at the back, but do not rule anything out at the moment. Certainly we are going to be seeing a very different set of conditions, and that's probably, Sally, a good point to ask you right now as we go on board Offshore Team Germany, because this boat in the coastal race that we had yesterday outperformed everybody. I mean, right now it looked like the onboard, there looked like a few tempers on board, shall we just say, but they should be feeling pretty good about what's coming up in this leg.
Yeah, I think if they could hang on for this first 12 to 14 hours, like we said before, it can be, you know, all gains from the back of the fleet, especially with them. Now, if they make extra losses here, it's going to be tricky. They're going to have a lot to gain. And interesting, obviously, a few different of opinions of maybe about what angle to sail or which sail they're going to go to next, but a lot of arms flaring. You see there Annie Lush to the left of the screen. You know, she's a fantastic trimmer. She's basically pushing every second speed of the boat and does a lot with the targets, and is probably, you know, you can almost hear her being really vocal about what they should be doing. So what an asset to their team, and I no doubt that's been a big influence on their success in the last leg.
And probably fair to say, I think, that one of the things that Annie brings to that boat is this idea about what you can do when you have more than one person on board. So many of the sailors in this IMOCA 60 fleet are used to doing one person sleeping, navigating and everything. You get those people who have gone around the world in the 65s. No, you can push harder than this. Is that a fair thing to say?
I think that's totally fair, and there's going to be an interesting balance of who's pushing, or, you know, basically the single-handed sailors saying this is how we do it, we need to slow down, and then the more crude sailors saying, okay, well, we can push harder here, and learning when they need to slow down before things break. And so there's going to be quite a dynamic, but yeah, like we said, I think it's going to be a cool thing to see as far as how hard they can push these 60s, especially on this first downwind.
Oh, well, one team that's not going to be holding back, certainly the 65s, is Murray, and Sally, I mean, this is a boat that's got a lot of fans. They announced early, they've been incredibly professional, they've done an awful lot of work, and leg one, I mean, it really was a bit of a shocker that they pinned themselves to the wall saying that North was going to be the way to go, and unfortunately, they lost it all.
Yeah, I imagine they had a really successful debrief after that leg, and, you know, the very end of it, you could hear their decisions, basically, that they felt very limited, and I thought that was really interesting about how they put themselves in a little box there instead of just, you know, they're sailing a one design boat, so I'd imagine the debrief included a bit more like, hey, let's think about more one design tactics, which is just stay with the fleet, and it's not that hard to do, especially when the fleet is so close.
The VO65's lining up for the start. 14 knots of wind from the north, and we're going to be seeing these boats pushing pretty hard. Right now it's J1's up with what looks like the masthead code 0 furled up on all of the boats, but ready to go once they get off that line and they see what that angle is with the breeze to that first mark. Amber sail to leeward, sailing Poland in a nice bit of space with Aktionabel Ocean Racing and Murpuri Racing Team to the windward of everybody else. Sailing Poland now deploys that masthead code 0. Murpuri Ocean Racing doing the same as well. All of the pumps working to get these sails out. Childhood 1 just to leeward of the Austrian Ocean Race team. They're the most windward team as the gun fires. And look at the breeze on Childhood 1. It's big heel. They found the gust. Now it rolls on down the whole fleet as you saw one boat after the other leaning over. The Austrian Ocean Race project late to get their masthead code 0 in, but it's working now and they look very comfortable to windward.
That windward position might be quite nice, yeah, as they can actually hold the pressure first and roll over the top. But look at Team Mexico, they just punch through there at the bottom, and actually they have a very nice trim on the masthead, which is making them accelerate, which is super nice.
And that windward angle for the Austrian Ocean Race project is working incredibly well. They've actually been able to bear away on a nicer angle when those gusts hits. They can take that gust for speed, and they've just rolled over the top of Childhood One. The boat that's struggling at the moment is Murpuri Ocean Racing. They are Murpuri Foundation Racing Team, sorry. They are at the back of the fleet at the moment. Early days, and of course we have a big downwind to go, but in the coastal race, it wasn't the downwind that favoured Murpuri Foundation. It was actually Accionabel Ocean Racing. They were the boat that did well. So the Portuguese team will be wanting to keep in touch. And as I say that, look at that. Accionabel Ocean Racing is their turn to suffer.
I think a noticeable difference here is the teams that went for the J2 versus the J3, or sorry, the J1 versus the J2. And you saw Murpuri there just having to drop the J1. I tell you what, that is a huge effort with, you know, 5 or 6 people on the bow to try to not let it drag in the water. And these lead boats are all with the J2, which means they could just furl it up when they don't want it, but it's also acting as a really good stay sail at this angle.
See, that's why we get the experts here. I didn't see the difference between the 2 and the 1, but as you can see on the helicopter shot just going out of view on the left, the crew on the bow, the J1 hanked on to that forestay. I'm sure just thinking about that, Sally, you can remember some pretty cold nights rigging that sail.
Oh, it's actually a nightmare. You get the bloody fingertips trying to grab the sail over the rail to drop it. And, you know, there's not huge waves right now, so you can keep pushing the boat when you want to drop it. But for sure, the J1 is too big of a sail to have as a stay sail. And you can see here, the J2 is actually working really nicely as in the slot.
Now just watch this gust rolling down from windward. It's going to hit Childhood One first. The Austrian Ocean Race team have come right the way down. They weren't comfortable just sitting to windward and trying to sail that high line. And as those gusts roll down, there it can hit Childhood One. Now it hits the Austrian boat. Both teams control themselves nicely. Just wait and see for who is potentially going to be spinning out there, because they haven't got that much warning about when these gusts are going to hit, Sally.
That's right, and you know, the thing with these gusts is that you have to find the balance of, yeah, keeping the boat underneath itself and then actually what sail you can depower. And when you have the big masthead on there, you can see how eased it is already on some of the boats. So easing it more can actually, you either have the choice to luff or actually it gets more powerful. So it's a tricky choice, but you know, the 65s do like to sail at quite an extreme heel angle. It can be very uncomfortable for most of the ride on a reach, and once they get the pressure, it can handle, you know, generally 40-some degrees at heel, which is quite incredible.
Interesting to see the change of angle there with the Austrians. Light winds coming up, windy coming down, and they are just out of picture at the just in the middle of the picture at the moment, underneath Childhood One. Those two teams pushing quite hard, sailing Poland behind. Murpuri Foundation Racing Team managing to get back into the mix with Accionabel Ocean Racing to windward at the moment. And Sally, it looks like Viva Mexico have suffered a little bit. It was always going to be a bit risky on that leeward side.
That's true, and it looks like they don't have their masthead up. I didn't get quite a solid look at them, but yeah, I think basically holding as much power as you can here, and they're probably just struggling to keep their nose clear. And like we can see here, the pressure's coming from the top. So you can see Childhood coming up for a little bit more pressure and then probably taking it down, and that's how you can keep moving forward on the fleet. But really loving how the Austrian Ocean Racing Team is, you know, they said we got a couple newbies on the boat and they're still pushing the boat really hard in these tricky, puffy conditions.
Well, don't take what you're seeing on the tracker to heart. Accionabel Ocean Racing, we're just waiting for the latest ping from their position beacon. That then, there we go, brings them back into it. Now, this is the boat that is leading at the moment with the Austrian Ocean Race team. And Sally, I mean, you mentioned it just a moment ago, they weren't expecting to win leg one. They were talking about holding everything back and keeping the crew safe for leg two, which I'm sure they will do. But right now, I'm sure they're loving it.
They're totally loving it. And look at the guys on the back pedestal, you know, big smiles all around as they're looking back aft and seeing the whole fleet behind them. How cool. And, you know, these boats they're one design, but they're tricky to get going in these sort of different conditions. And actually, there's a lot of experience, a Volvo 65 experience behind them that they're leading, which is super cool.
Well, just as we pull out on the tracker there, and now you can see where the heli, 11th Hour Ocean Racing, are heading back into the shore. If you were watching from the beginning, you'll know that they had a little bit of an incident out on the water, and it looked like they were having a look at the structural system with their leeward foil. We couldn't really tell anything from the helicopter pictures, but they are making their way back in, and we'll bring you more information about that when we have it. Meanwhile, with the 65s, we've been talking about the breeze, Sally, and right now it is lacking.
It's totally lacking. A nice huge lull here, which means, you know, the trim gets more dynamic, but also having this windward position is going to be, you know, should be advantageous with the Austrian project here.
If you were able to overlay the track of the 65s with the 60s, you'll see just how much the leaders of the 65s have luffed to try and defend against these boats rolling over the top. And that's why we're seeing perhaps the fleet in this light wind patch. They've sailed much closer to the coast on their way to this first mark, something that the 60s didn't do. Now you can see the Austrian Ocean Race team again from that windward position, able to make it work for them, just like we saw on the start line. And now they put the bows down. Childhood 1, they now go down, and they're going to be the first two boats with the breeze and moving well. And if you're on board the Austrian Race Project, you're a young sailor, you can't believe how well you did in leg 1. And now, if you want to see the other boats, you've got to look behind you.
Yeah, you know what I love about this shot is you see their heads just, it's like they're on these swivels. They're really super aware, but the mouths aren't going, you know? They're looking and they're listening, and that, when you have a big crew like this, especially young, it's super important to have that, because you have a direction from the skipper, from the trimmer, but it's people taking in information and doing the right thing with it, whereas sometimes we get a little bit wrapped up in a lot of communication.
We're just seeing behind arguably the race leaders at the moment, the Austrian Ocean Race Project, is Viva Mexico. They look to me like they were setting up their A4, which we would expect them to use as they turn around this mark. Mercury Foundation Racing team to the leeward of the Ocean Race team. They look pretty good, and we are on board now with Viva Mexico. You can see the Austrian team in the breeze. That's the wind that's going to hit this boat in around about 20 to 30 seconds. But look at the Portuguese team on the left-hand side of your picture. I mean, they are just sailing straight through that leeward side.
Yeah, I think Viva Mexico here, the difference is I believe they're on their J0 instead of their masthead, which just is about half the sail area. You can kind of see it in the comparison shot there, which is okay. It's super conservative. I think if the pressure was up more or consistent, they would have been fine holding that leeward position as you saw them accelerate right off the line. But, you know, the power in the masthead through the lulls proved to be a big gain here.
So a sail change on board the Austrian Ocean Race Project. Sally, not putting up any of these sails is a little bit of a challenge, but at least this one's a bit smaller.
Yeah, that looks like the J3 going up there just as either a third stay sail or sorry, second stay sail, or if they go for the A4, they probably use that a little more downwind angles. Maybe they're going to stay with the masthead. We'll see what angle they choose.
So we're just going to move forward now to the Amoca 60s, offshore team Germany, at the back where we left them at that turning mark, with Buurf Ali, who were looking pretty confident around that mark. They came around in second place, but now a little bit behind the others. Coram further out offshore with linked out now, and just look at the conditions. This is what all these sailors were really waiting for. Everything before this moment was just a precursor.
And normally I'm not jealous, but now I am. This is awesome. This is quite a great, you know, sight to see. A little more pressure, and the boats are even going to lift a little bit higher. And you know, being on the bow there without the water coming over the deck is just so much freedom when you're driving the boat and finding the angles.
Linked out, enjoying themselves with that big sail. And Sally, I can see now why they wanted that stack at the back. I mean, I know from this angle, from the heli, but it looks like the boat in this sea state is digging that nose in.
Yeah, it sort of is. I think you know, when the wave state is really short and close together, it's super hard for the boat to leap over, and sometimes it gets a little bit stuck. But generally, the bigger waves, then it can actually surf. If they're wider, then they can surf along the top of them.
Linked out, blasting down at the moment with some pretty impressive speeds. That big sail really coming into play, and as Sally said, the sea state keeping the sailors working pretty hard. This is in the lead at the moment with the Amoca 60s, and it was Linked Out that was pushing so hard on leg one and putting in such a strong display, along with 11th Hour Racing. And if you've been following us in this race, you'll know that 11th Hour Racing had an incident with a spectator boat out on the course that was at anchor. Well, we've just had confirmation that everybody on board 11th Hour Racing is fine, and everyone on board the spectator boat is fine as well. 11th Hour Racing heading in for shore just to check on the systems on their boat, but everybody involved is safe and well, so that's very good news. We're going to stay with the racing at the moment. What was 5 Amoca 60s out in the water is now 4, and behind them is the VO 65s round that first mark, and you can see just how much they have been pushed to windward of that mark, possibly by the Austrian Ocean Race project. But I think each of the boats played their part, not least Childhood One, that was attacking and causing the Austrians to luff. And now we can see, Sally, it looks like the big sails are out, and it's time to think pretty carefully about how much canvas you want in the air.
Yeah, and you can see the you know, the big A4 plugged in there, and they're gonna, looks like they're just furling the J2, hand furling it from the bow, which is, you know, kind of interesting. That's a big effort. You know, we've seen as well coming into the last finish, these A4s, the boat handling to get them in the air, it's still a new sail for the 65. So it's a little bit tricky. It's a big cloth sail, so it's not on a furler. It's not so easy just to hoist and deploy. You need to get it up in the air and deploy it without it, you know, going in the water or you know, becoming a big flag. So it can be tricky, and I'd imagine these boats are going to settle down a little bit, hoist it, and then furl their mastheads so they can get going at a better, faster downwind angle.
Well, we talk a lot about young teams, and chasing Childhood One while they make that sail change is Sailing Poland. This is a young team. I mean, on their roster, they've got 2 16-year-olds, 2 17-year-olds. It is a group of very passionate and very skilled sailors, but really lacking in that offshore experience. And amazing to see them basically saying to Childhood One, yeah, you furl those sails if you want to. We're going to keep ours up. More sails, we can hold it, and we can push pretty hard. And if you are a young sailor on board this boat, who better to be looking after you in these conditions than someone like Bauerbecking?
Yeah, definitely kind of half experienced and half super young. And that could be such a great learning experience for these. You can see a bit of the young blood there on the pedestals, just taking in all the comms, trying to do the right thing, trying to anticipate what's coming next, and having, you know, somebody like Bauerbecking on the wheel there, explaining what's going to go on and what he wants to happen next, can be some of the best learning for these sailors. And that's Jacco, I think that's Jacco Signorini on the main, and Axel on the, you know, on the navigation. Two guys that were part of Team SCA with us, and, you know, I have firsthand experience from learning from them too, which was, you know, quite a treat as we had our experience going on.
Well, it looks like Sailing Poland have decided to get rid of that J2. There yet again, you can see the A4, as you were saying, Sally, plugged in on this boat. It's a new boat, new sail, sorry. It's been getting a lot of miles in the first leg, certainly, of the Ocean Race, and now it looks like they are springing into action. The foredeck crew pulling the sail ties on the bag. They can now release that A4 and it starts to hoist. And if you're used to dinghy sailing or even just small keelboat sailing, you'll know that it only takes a few pulls to get the spinnaker up in the air. Not the case with the 65s. This is a heavy beast.
It's super heavy, and obviously I haven't experienced trying to hoist the A4, but I remember trying to hoist the A3, which was a furling sail, and that was a full blast, all-out effort, and you get your heart rate really spiked up. You want to get that thing up in the air as fast as possible so that it's, first of all, less drag and it doesn't deploy or or have any problems on the way up. So it'll be super interesting to see these changes.
Chris Nicholson's Axel Nobel Ocean Racing going downwind with the A4 up and what looked like to be the J2. Now, they put in a really strong performance on the downwind in the coastal races. They outperformed Murpuri Foundation Racing Team. They picked what seemed to be the right jibe, but ahead of them, Murpuri Foundation Racing Team seems to have, well, maybe learned from their mistakes. They seem to have got themselves back into the game and got low. The course for this second leg, 600-mile nautical leg, is basically round the bottom of Spain. And while you want to be sailing out to get into better breeze, realistically, the next turn is to the left of where all these boats are going. So if you can go fast and low, then you are definitely winning.
I would say Axel Nobel did a great job with the peel here. You can see the boats ahead of them just starting to peel. It's all in the setup, really, about how ready you are for deploying or hoisting these sails and deploying them. And they look like they're on the A4, one of the quicker teams on the A4 as far as timing, which means, just like you said, now they're able to sail lower and faster. And you know, they need to, when they're in the back of the fleet here, now they need some leverage, basically, to leeward of the fleet.
Axel Nobel Ocean Racing at the back, but on a good leeward course. Viva Mexico at the moment, or they are pushing quite hard right now. Amber Sail 2 we're going to go on board with. They have got a big stack, and have a look at that. That was the hoist that we just missed, that hoist there, Sally, and the bottom of the spinnaker just licking the water, and that's a little bit of a close call, shall we say.
It sure is, and like I said, the timing is critical. I think on these A4 hoists, you can see the other two boats to leeward. They're already on the A4, which means they're already blasting along. If something goes wrong, if there's an override or whatever, you just can't risk getting the foot of the sail. We call it shrimping, basically to leeward, and looks like they did a good job there. The next move will be to furl the masthead, and you know, I'd imagine they'll be taking the mastheads down in due time here, but that'll be also another maneuver where they probably have to bear the boat away, get it around the J2, and then drop it on the deck. It just depends if they think they're going to use it again in the next couple hours, or if it's going to be, you know, a bit of a drag from the front.
Well, the big furl on the masthead code 0, and if you're wondering whether any of these sailors are tired, I mean, Sally, you talked about, look at that, I was just wondering, and you could just see them gulping in oxygen, breathing in through the ears, trying to get anything back into their body.
It's a big hoist, you know, to the top of the mast, and you know, what these sailors don't have quite yet is that sort of grinding stamina that you have halfway through the ocean race, or as you're, you know, kind of at the end of going around the world. I remember thinking, like, why was I so tired before? Now I can do it all. But at the beginning, man, it's a big spike in heart rate. It's a big shoulder and forearm burn. And you got to get the technique right on the pedestals, or you basically fry your upper body really fast.
And then just when you think you're working really hard, when you're hoisting the A4 and the weight is kicking in, somebody pulls the sheet too early, and then suddenly you've got to hoist it through the breeze.
Yeah, and this is them trying to drop the masthead, and like I said, they have to bear away here a little bit. They're trying to get it to windward. It would be a super hard maneuver to pull it into leeward. They have their J3 in the way, but they're trying to time the halyard drop with the bear away to kind of get it around to leeward. But also those sheets, as you were saying, if they're too tight, this maneuver becomes super hard. So it's a coordination. There's a lot of people doing a lot of things right now, and it's a coordination of everybody to get the masthead off the lock, which the pitman is doing right there. And here comes the halyard. Hopefully they can drop it with the timed bear away, and then they get it down on the deck. But, you know, all in the due time of getting blasted by some waves on the bow. It can be tricky.
And it was interesting as well on that chase boat shot, just to see, there we go again, how eased the tack of the A4 is from the end of the prodder. I'm not sure that's deliberate.
I don't think it is. Normally you have to have a transfer, like a pullback on the tack, to make sure that the two units, the tack units, don't, you know, basically get in the way of each other. So the A4 would have been a bit higher. It'd be interesting how, I mean, it's a new sail, so generally if they're trying to go downwind in lighter air, I would say the tack would be a little bit higher for more power, but I'd imagine they'd be pulling some tension on it as soon as this masthead zero's out of the way.
Now, if that shot doesn't make you wish that you were out there on the water on these boats, I don't know what will. The VO65s blasting off downwind with their A4 VMG runner. Ahead of them, it's the Amoca 60s, and for both fleets at the moment, we are seeing some pretty good speeds. 20 knots, over 20 knots for Mapuri and for Sailing Poland. Accidabel Ocean Racing also pushing hard, but realistically we can imagine that the speeds are going to be set by these teams here. And if you're wondering just how much speed we are seeing, I mean, Bureau Valley right there, I mean, I'm wondering whether they are actually just taking in a reef. I mean, it looked like their mainsail was flogging.
It sure did. I was thinking the same thing. Either they're going so fast that the apparent wind is so far forward that the main isn't doing anything, or there's so much pressure that they actually have it so far eased out that they want to drop. Looks like they have just dropped the reef in there. You can see the head coming down from the top of the rig. But yeah, good, really good mode on Bureau Valley, and looks like they're going lower and faster than the group.
Well, with the breeze comes the speed, and with the speed comes the limit of our connectivity and our helicopter range. And if you're seeing the pictures, we are pushing what we can achieve here. The helicopter is still with the Amoca 60s out there filming them, but getting the pictures back to us is a little bit of a challenge. So when we can, we will. We've got onboards as well, but of course, the further south these boats push into the wind, we are going to start losing some of those live images. And just look at the speeds here. And Sally, I mean, so much has been said. The Amoca 60s are not racing the 65s. They are two separate fleets. But there is a lot of pride for fans of the Amoca 60 and for fans of the VO65 as to which boat is going to perform well. And so far, the 65s, I mean, I'm looking at these speeds. Yep, Bureau Valley, nearly 23 knots. But the 65s are not being completely outpaced.
That's true, and it's a little bit of a surprise because you have the dynamic of the foils on the 60s, which should just create easier speeds, basically, and easier modes. But I think what you have in the 65s is the maneuverability and the knowledge about pushing the boats with a fully crewed team. And I only expect the 60s to gain knowledge and gain speed and overall faster miles as these legs go on, and for sure into the ocean race. But you know, right now the 65s, like you said, they're proving to hold up out on the ocean, and obviously they've been around the world twice, so we know they're durable. What also means for the teams is that they can just push them as hard as possible. It's actually, you know, it's not impossible to break those boats, but it is hard to push them beyond their limit, which is, you know, a quality that can be really great out on the ocean. You don't have to throttle back, whereas the 60s have to decide when that moment is.
Well, the part of this leg that was close to the shore and arguably in a little bit of shelter is over. There is the image, there is the conditions, there are the white caps and the waves that are going to be dominating the course for the next little bit. But Sally, it is a little bit of a mixed picture. We're going to, in a second, just take a little bit of a look at the conditions for the next few days. But if you have been following us from the start, you'll know that 11th Hour Racing had an incident just after the start line with a spectator boat, and they're all fine. But Sally, for the boats racing, they've got a lot to think about. Talk us through what's ahead.
They sure do, and here's the continuation of them coming downwind. They're going to basically meet this transition zone as the breeze is trying to go from the north to the east. The trickiest part of the race here is going to be through the Gibraltar Straits, where they have to decide around this exclusion zone. They're going to meet some big waves and big breeze head-on. Be a lot of tacking, upwind, and maneuvering, trying to get all the way to Alicante as the breeze basically fades out and can be really patchy.
So a very interesting few days to go, and it's been a little bit difficult for a lot of people to try and call as to exactly when the fleet are going to be finishing. Depending on whether you get an honest answer from the navigators, it could be 3, 4 or 5 days. But right now, none of the teams are really going to be thinking about that. They are just going to be thinking about maximizing that power. The Austrian Ocean Race Project, the boat that struggled for pace on leg one, struggled for pace in the big downwind, and then held their nerve and kept their cool and found their way through the light winds into the approach to the Cascais, doing so well. Currently at the top of the VO65 scoreboard. Are they going to be able to hold everything? Well, we are just about at the limit of our helicopter range and our chase boat range. The boat's sailing so fast, so quickly, and they have put the miles in that we are going to say goodbye to the Imoca 60s and the VO 65s as the boats continue to push south and out into some big breeze before the challenges of the rest of the leg. We hope that you have enjoyed the conditions today. Just one more time to reiterate that 11th Hour Racing, not on the water at the moment. They have returned back to shore to check on their boat after that altercation with a spectator boat. All parties involved are well, but just a final check down of the boat before they will continue. We hope you've enjoyed the racing. We're going to be following the boats daily and keeping up to date with who is winning, who's doing well out on the course, and the challenges that all of these boats are going to experience over the next 600 miles. And we'll see you soon.